All right, I think we're live.
Yeah, we're starting a tad bit early for a change to shock everybody. A minute or two early instead of right on the button or a minute or two late. Welcome to Evolution Hour on a cold, practically everywhere in the country is cold these days. That's the joys of that giant heat sink in the Pacific Ocean pushing the jet stream over and pumping Arctic air down when it isn't supposed to. Welcome to the 21st century. Isn't it fun? Anyway, welcome to the next installment of Contested Bones, where they are still diving kind of, sort of, knee deep into the genetics information. But as I hinted in pre-notes when I looked ahead, it's basically Sanford and Behe's version of things. And boy, did it hit pay dirt on this particular episode as I went down and welcome to the 21st century. Isn't it
they
fun?
declare
Anyway,
that the famous Lenski LTEE long-term E. coli experiment shows the beneficial mutations may be as rare as 1 in a million. It is thought that beneficial mutations may be so rare that their rarity cannot be accurately measured. The evidence that beneficial mutations are extremely rare is continuing to grow. Well, the first statement about the rare is 1 in a million was wrong, and Lenski never said that. And the source that I put the link up to of this particular version of Lenski from 2011 didn't say that either, because it was just a general summary. The second one they dealt with was this Bataillon paper that isn't available open access to last, but it's about spontaneous genome mutation rates, which was not about mutations. It was about working out protocols to detect mutations. So it did not say that either. And then the third and fourth ones were a couple of pieces co-written by Sanford, which basically repeats the same shtick over and over again. So the moment I looked at that, I thought, somebody I know and I have been writing an extensive chapter going into excruciating detail on the entire Lenski experiment and how every creationist who's bumped into it has their head up their ass. So this was all very, very, very familiar stuff, because I suspect the irony is here that they've already gotten so far past the original false statement that it's just churning through their apologetics like a mantra. And that's what I found with Andrew Snelling in relation to geological data. And you find the same thing with Menton repeating things. If they talk themselves into thinking the thing they got wrong is actually right. And it just gets repeated trope all the way down the line. And nobody ever bothers to look at the original sources, including apparently the creationists. So we welcome Brian and TD Lane and Immutable Destiny. I will put a little side note. C. Brown, the young Earth creationist, who may or may not pop up in the feed at all, quite a ways back when we were talking about the radiometric dating stuff, he was disputing that radiometric dating could date or give a value for a diamond that was perfectly natural and like 80, 90,000 years old as you're measuring tiny trace amounts and all that. There's a perfectly fine technical literature on that. And I challenged him in the side comments about that. And I said, listen, Buckaroo, if you want to comment on this, you need to contact the scientists involved and explain to them how you know their discipline way better than they do and get their response. And I will accept no response from you until you do that. Well, he hadn't done that. So every single time he puts in a comment on there, I delete it. It's usually the same boilerplate crap anyway. So, I mean, it's no great loss to civilization. But the point is that I drew that little line in the sand. You can contact the scientists. Their bloody emails are accessible. I did it. That's how I got Taylor and Saldon's paper. So if you're a lazy little bastard or too timorous to do so, well, too bad. Until you give a response on that, no more comments. So you can just fuss pot and haunt somebody else's feed on that, but you're not going to get it from here.
You pushed him over to my feed, RJ.
Well, yeah, you may have to do the same thing there, or you ask him a question he can't possibly answer and say, until you answer it.
Well, I mean, I don't delete their comments any. I don't think I've only done that, I think, for one person. It was a guy because he was just cussing and ranting, and so I was like, yeah, there's no need for that. But that was
well, I only did it for C. Brown simply because he dances around in foot pads and tap dances so relentlessly.
Well, I just ignore them all
down on a point. So here was one that was a very specific issue, which is about whether or not cosmic rays can generate carbon 14 inside of an atom of diamond, because there's nitrogen in there and it can convert to carbon 14 exactly the way it does in the atmosphere. It's relatively rare, but it doesn't really need to. Havros says, "Good day, mate." And I will say, "Good day," right back.
I
And
just
hi,
ignore
BJ.
them. There's so many of them.
Who is getting a tongue but down? Yeah. Steve Brown is perfectly understandable that he argues the stuff that he does. He actually bought Contested Bones because I had been criticizing it. And so that means I actually made a sale inadvertently for Rupe and Sanford. So shameless plug, get my book and get the new book when we get that one out by the end of the year. The volume 1 of Rocks were there, and tell everybody about these things, because the information is all out there. And it's just a matter of disseminating it and making sure that as many people as possible know it. And also get on the source methods bandwagon, damn it. Everybody can play this game except Tortukans. They cannot play the source methods game. So the more people that get involved with that, the better. Old Scratch is just asking what created kind Myocids are. Yeah. As, for those of you who are not aware, the Myocids are the cute little ancestors to the carnivora cats and dogs and crowd. And we have a section on that in chapter 5 on the baraminology stuff in the new Rocks book. So we're covering. Oh, by the way, I did a rough guesstimation of our bibliography on that. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,500 sources. So it's more than Evolution Slam Dunk, which was a reasonably well documented, and again, we're material. So anyway, we're slogging along on that. I'm knee deep in polystrate fossils, the section that Jackson wrote on that part. I've finished up the material on the overthrust issues, and now we're into those polystrate fossils. There's still stuff on coral reefs and coal formations and salt and a few of the other. Anybody that knows anything about creation science is going to have all these little familiar tropes popping up in there. Anyway, I put the links then up to the stuff that Rupe and Sanford were dealing with, and it gives a sense about how what mutations are really involving and what kind of a technical work they're kind of sliding past in here. And it's revealing incestuous, actually a hell of a lot of material on the Lenski work. For those of you who are unaware of it, it was asking the question, what exactly is kind of baseline mutation dynamics in an organism? So they picked E. coli, but not just any old branch of E. coli. It was E. coli without any plastids, like a stripped down go-kart version of a bacterium that didn't have any of the other packages that are the drivers of more elaborate adaptation. And the reason why they wanted to do that was to get that baseline. So now you take that little baseline organism and let it just do its thing without interference, but yet you just change the environment. So now you can control the variables and test out single things. And they've generated a massive stack, I think something on the order of like 60 pages of major papers over decades, involving with various co-authors and all that over the years. I think they got up to what? It was like 40, 50, 60,000 generations or something like that. It's a hell of a lot. And because the little critters breed quickly.
I mean, at least, because it was at 50,000 or so generations that they had the citrate mutation.
Beach says, anyone think that Jackson is starting to look professorial? Very possibly.
Let me just grab my tweed
I'm sure
jacket.
He'll look more professorial. I'm sure he'll look more professorial than I do, because I always tend to look like just a geek.
Well, you know what? I need to go out and buy a tweed jacket, I guess. So.
Yeah. So it's got an old hat and pipe. You don't have to actually smoke it. You can just stand around. Oh, that would be more in the old days. Here you shows how times have changed. When I entered college in 1970, professors routinely smoked pipes in class. Nobody gave it a second thought. That shows you how far back things were going. You know, it was an ancient time, in innocent age, in the old days, you know, when we were still on dial-up. Not even on dial-up, dial telephones. It goes way far back. Anyway, that whole bit about mutation rate thing is extremely relevant because it's measuring what can go on at that base level. Now, of course, the bacteria didn't turn into an elephant or a rhododendron.
Should
It
have.
didn't grow legs. It didn't turn into a bird. Of course not. They weren't trying to. It didn't even form a new species because they weren't interested in speciation. And of course, bacterial species are, yeah, it's a bacterial species aren't like sexually reproducing ones, and so species is more an indication of a genetically compatible population mix. So the definition is a little squishier when you get into that level on. But the point is that they were deliberately picking an organism that would not have a lot of the drivers of more significant adaptive twists, and which will bring us to the second half of the show with Fazal, Rana, and mitochondria. That the idea of endosymbiosis. That there are quite a few works that relate to the issue that the reason why complex multicellular organisms, including us, came about is because of an endosymbiotic process. That the pieces that make up a bacterial endosymbiosis can do things that the two individual parts are never going to do. That it allows exchanges and compartmentalizations of stuff. That's absolutely amazing. And so I put up a bunch of links on that, not all of which I was able to glom onto, unfortunately, open access. So there was a brand new paper that was out that unfortunately isn't open access yet, but I put up some other side papers that are accessible so that that'll kind of fill in the stuff. But anyway, we'll get on down to that in a little bit. And inadvertently, the little bastard Rana managed to bring up a topic from he was authority quoting Franklin Harold's In Search of Cell History, and I was aware of Harold stuff variously. He's been authority quoted occasionally, but it turned out I was able to gain access to his whole little book, which he was authority quoting from. It is really quite a fascinating little piece. And so yeah, that's the cardinal rule of research is you learn shit by following up on the stuff that gets riffed off of that probably is a perfectly valid work. Look at James Cole. My gosh, I mean, you got people like that, where they're going to throw a science thing at you and it's going to be impressive because it's a science thing. Well, read it.
Oh yeah, we were talking about that. I think it was last week after the show. How some creationist on one of my videos had tossed a paper at me. He claimed 99.999% of mutations were deleterious, and he threw a paper at me discussing deleterious polymorphisms. So mutations that were already known to be harmful, not mutations generally. It was weird.
It's like saying here is a survey of the cause of house fires, and you jump to the conclusion that means all houses are on fire.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So
yeah, there's a terrible problem with a lot of them. Just don't read the fine print. A lot of them are probably riffing off of just a Google search where they're finding a technical paper that way, or worse. And this is the case that I was just dealing with, jousting with Lee Weatherly on Twitter. He's a young Earth creationist, and Genesis 1-1 is his wife, I guess, and they do tag team creation jousts on Twitter. But the thing is that he'll bring up a topic like panspermia and Orgel and Crick that he's probably never read diddly squat about. He's only got it secondarily from the authority quote. And that's a dangerous thing to do. It's a dangerous thing for anybody. Even if you want to defend evolution, don't just read a post and crib a few little bits that you don't really know how to explain, because if you don't understand it, what happens if you bump into a creationist that knows more about it than you do? They're going to eat you alive, and you're going to make your side look bad. So always grounded in a solid understanding, because if you can't explain it, then you don't understand it, and you need to be able to understand it. So everybody can make use of this stuff. I'm a BA in history. I'm not a scientist. I don't have a credentials in that department, but I'm really curious. And all you got to do is to look up the material. And if you encounter terms that you don't understand. I'm encountering them all the time, like that weird pseudo dictylites or something. There's some strange little rock formation that comes from crystals that occur when mountains slide against each other and they heat up and all that. They produce very characteristic kinds of little layers in between. And there's a technical term for it. Well, you'll learn about that, you know.
I don't know. I like sliding up and heating. I like that term.
Yeah, sliding up and heating. Yeah, that's basically it. Oh, Puff says, have you considered having a guest on with knowledge in botany and its long evolution? I'd be delighted.
Actually,
yeah,
I do happen to know someone. I've floated the idea with him about coming on, who is a botanist. He specializes in angiosperms, and I have floated the idea with him coming on. I haven't nailed anything down, but I
think the major area that would be fascinating is if they're primarily in angiosperms, then they're probably going to be familiar with the Mesozoic when those are appearing in the fossil record. And so we're talking about the paleodynamics of them, the extent to which insect symbiosis for pollination was occurring during that period, and in what order. And therefore, with somebody that's an actual botanist, they're going to be up to speed on the current cutting literature. And I have him or her say, hey, come on, it'll be fun.
He actually just 2 weeks ago, I think, sent me a paper on a gene in flowers, because there's, you know, we think about developmental work, we think primarily about animals, right? Because we're very animal centric. But actually, there's a lot of developmental work going on in plants too, like Arabidopsis. And one of the papers he sent me was on a particular gene that controls the development of inflorescences in flowers. So an inflorescence, if you're not familiar with the term, when you have a bunch of flowers clustered together on a plant, that's called an inflorescence. Like a sunflower is not one flower, it's a whole bunch of flowers packed together. And so there's one single gene called leafy that regulates,
cleverly named,
right, that regulates how these are patterned. And so there's a hypothesis that the entirety of inflorescence variation in all flowers
is cascaded off from that
one gene,
from a single mutation, or at least a grouping that performs that. And that mutation, if it's a relatively easy one to happen, could have occurred multiple times in varying lineages, or if it's an extremely rare one, then that increases the likelihood that it was occurring in relatively few lineages from which each one have developed that way. And of course, since plants can get hybrid sex happy, that makes things much more interesting in terms of the development. There you go. Brian says, Puff Like Botany says a great YouTube channel on botany. Emotionally says, hence the name of the guy's channel, Crime Pays, but Botany doesn't. Yeah.
He would, this guy would tell you the same thing. So
although there is a business side in the sense of relating to modern plants and how they are going to be interacting with the pests and therefore pesticide issues or environmental techniques. So there is a monetary aspect of it, but looking at the evolutionary origin of plants back in the Mesozoic, that's not exactly a great moneymaker in the same way that most all paleontology is. That the people who do it not because this is a road to fame and fortune, because it's in fact a road to dirty, dark, weird places where you've got to dig and stay outside in the broiling sun and then slaps plaster of Paris around crap and then look through microscopes digging things off your little No, this is for people who love it, and they do it because they adore doing it. So it's so anything in the botany area would be a delicious thing that I'm sure both Jackson and I would have umpteen questions to ask about the current field. And that whole bit about the genetic systems underlying the biology is stuff that, although work was starting to kick into the 1990s, the vast majority of it has been done by living scientists only in like the last 15 years. So there's been just an explosion of work, because what they want to do is to find if something is being developed because of regulatory cascades interacting with the various genes that interact, you've got to know what those core genes are and the regulatory cascade systems. So you have to kind of build up a network, a systems approach to it, to be able to realize what's interconnecting with what that causes this to do that and all that thing. And they're now reaching that stage where they're doing that. So, and then give them clever names like Leafy.
Yeah, because scientists have senses of humor too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it often doesn't show up
in the cold, dry, dusty papers and all that. But you go to the conferences and you see the kind of presentations that they're doing there, or the lectures that they do for college audiences as well, is that they loosen up a lot in those contexts. Even geologists can crack a joke, although it'll be an in joke, where if you don't know the references to the geology stuff, it'll go right over the head.
Yeah.
So we're continuing to do our delightful plugs for the Rocks Were There book that will just make a hell of a lot of creationists extremely annoying, because they're not going to like at all what we've been doing with their analytical material. The source method stuff that I've been doing here on this channel is what we're doing in spades in the new work. And so it's a matter of take a look at what the creationist says. This is their position. Do they offer evidence for it? Sometimes not. Sometimes they do, and it's a technical paper. So let's look at the technical paper and read what it says. And this doesn't quite say what they said it did it? Yeah, they got the authority quote here, but look at what they was said just on the very next paragraph. And then look at the sources that they cited for that. And notice the fact that this says the exact opposite of what they were, and it's like that over and over and over again. And so you'll learn a ton of stuff. I think Jackson will want to say, no more geology, rocks, yeah.
Yeah, rocks
and I'll probably be, and in the second volume, I know I'll be going through the same bit with the cosmology stuff that I've been postponing for a long time to go after, because it's a very technical field. But there is an advantage of us doing that kind of work now, because we've got space telescopes and a level of technical information and the accessibility of it online that wouldn't have been the case back when I was just starting the TIP project in earnest 15 years ago. So there is some utility to waiting, because you get accessibility to stuff, and so you can interact with who the players are. There's a lot more bloggers and secondary accounts that give you insights as to what the skivvy is on what's the current hot topics and all of that. And that it would have been very, very difficult to be doing 15, 20 years ago. Let's see who's on it. Buffaloficus says, I wonder if science even knows about the blonde trash pandas of Oakland.
Oh.
I have no knowledge of that.
Back to Rana.
Yeah.
I will actually be having a discussion with him on the 18th on my channel.
Yeah.
So,
since I'll be discussing Rana and the rest of this show, that's something that you can maybe bring up to him as well on that material. We'll get to that in after a bit. I'll go ahead and do my thank yous early, so I won't have to go back to it about our patrons. Sorry, I can't put up the image of that, but I don't want to go through the rigmarole of the screen sharing thing. But anyway, our patrons, I thank every single person who has clicked on the patron and has helped. I'd love to obviously see more, and everybody who is a supporter of the project, let people know why you're doing it, and then they can make up their own minds as to whether or not maybe they could pitch in a little bit too, to make it even easier to not have to juggle ink and bills and food and all the other stuff. Anyway, our colleague level, Henrol and Eric Rowley and Suris, our researcher level, Travis Adams and Convert Me and Eat Meal and Ralph McFadden and Pelagia and Benjamin Simpson and Ugly German Trues, and our assistant researcher level, Mike Apple and Duranko and James Fitzwater and Otis Real, and our friend level, Daniel and Stephen Bauman and Marigale Beddoes, Insticts Are Cool, Morton Nielsen, Puffalophagus, who is in the feed watching, Bo Hobo Rasmussen, Staggles, Alex Stone, and Paul Williams. And then I will still thank the legacy patrons who helped in one capacity or another, even though they haven't been able to keep up with it. Jen and Jody and John and Keith and Andrew and Dyer and Yui and Mona and Brad and Daniel and Nana and Sun Sky Stone and Everett and Sur and Zeshi. Every single one of you is very much appreciated. Also, those who have Evolution Slam Dunk or Paralogs Affiliates Fog for that matter, know that make sure you write reviews of it. Let everybody that you know about it. Also, theoretically, if you know people who have groups where they might want to have an actual lecture, either by Skype-ish or in person, however we can work out. Heck, I'm available. got the capacity to do that. And there are some links up at my old TIP website where you can check out debates and things that I've done. And my debate with Kent Hovind was a particularly useful one. It's applied source methods. I got a link up to that in the video description. So all of that, lots of ways to help. And this is all bloody volunteer stuff. Just say yourself, if it's a choice to say, well, should I support this old fart in Spokane? Think of the number of people who support Kent Hovind and Ken Ham's Answers in Genesis and flat earthers and fill in the blank and think, yeah, maybe more, our side needs a little bit more on that. And the world is not just Aaron Ra and Richard Dawkins, so there's more to it than that. Anyway, as mentioned and hinted at, Fazal Rana, I had stumbled on a posting a little ways back on ATP transport challenges the evolutionary origin of mitochondria, which is from, I'll interrupt here. Puffaluffagus says, I enjoyed your opinion piece, by the way. Thank you. I put a linkage up in both Twitter and on my Facebook page to it. It was a couple days ago. I wrote, I happen to be the atheist blogger at the Spokane Faith and Values group, which is essentially a religious ecumenical thing, and I'm their atheist, And I get along really well with everybody. That's a delightful thing. Anyway, I did a little brief posting on President Trump's character as exemplified by movies. So I offered quite a few examples of things that are, we've met this guy before. Charles Foster Kane in Citizen Kane, a rich egotist who has political ambitions and wants to be loved and adored, but doesn't do it back, and can be vindictive and petty, and finally ends his days living in his mansion down in Florida, griping about past things. Does this sound a little familiar? And I ended, after the rest of the essay, I ended with another one that I couldn't resist. There's a movie about a guy that really loves gold as much as Donald Trump. He even had a gold Rolls Royce as opposed to just a toilet in gold, and it has wheels. I don't know about the Trump one in Trump Tower, whether it has wheels or not. Anyway, and the guy owns a golf course. He likes to golf. He cheats at golf, just like Donald Trump. He's petty and vindictive and will conspire with foreign powers to get what he wants. And so I thought Auric Goldfinger is somebody that you could bond with, or maybe not. So I ended on that point. There's a whole bunch of other references on that. So check that out. Follow the
like
people.
Caligula? Is that one of them?
Caligula. Well, Caligula was an actual nutball. He came from a dysfunctional family to begin with. If your sister was Agrippina, the future mother of Nero, and the like, they were a weird bunch. Plus, he was an alcoholic, and they mixed in weird shit in the wine in those days, including lead, and drank them from lead cups.
Nice.
So with their lead plates and their lead plumbing, the elite were poisoning themselves and getting all bonkers in a variety of areas. So he was probably had some mental issues to begin with, which were not helped at all by his lifestyle. He's a funky little. Anybody who wants to see a dramatized but still interesting version of Caligula should see I, Claudius, the old BBC series that was done way back in the day with the 70s. Derek Jacobi played Claudius. John Hurt played Caligula. Jean-Luc Picard, Patrick Stewart played Sejanus, Tiberius's major domo. And so it's got a just big pile cast. Everybody should see it just for that. It's just an absolute classic. Anyway, the thing about this paper I put up, that one is open in access. It's by Wang and Wu. From 2014, which the fact that it's been a few years old puzzled me. That's always interesting. Ooh, cutting edge. Well, no, it's 5 years old. That means there's maybe work done since. Phylogenomic reconstruction indicates mitochondrial ancestor was an energy parasite. This was not disputing the endosymbiotic process. It was the debate about, was the symbiont a cooperation case, or was it a parasite that came to be essential and can never quite get its little mitts off of things?
Yeah.
And so it reopened a debate about what is the nature of early endosymbiosis. And Wang, a paper was in a 2018 paper in Nature, where the one that I couldn't link to fully, so I put some other side bars on that Martin's paper to kind of help on it. And basically, it's hinging upon a rather obvious problem. And it was directly mentioned in Search of Cell History, Franklin Harold's book, that I managed to get access to, that Rana authority quoted from. So I was curious to see where the authority quotes came from. And it turns out he was sidestepping all of these issues because Franklin had Harold had a very good section on the whole issues of endosymbiosis and was mentioning the obvious. It took place billions of years ago. You don't have the exact animals, the exact bacteria that were doing the endosymbiosis. And unlike cyanobacteria that became the chloroplasts in plants, nobody doubts that. Well, creationists do, but I mean, nobody in the biological field have an argument with it. That there's enough eccentricities about the details of the mitochondrion that make it hard to identify exactly which bacterial group is the one that may have been either the thing or close to the thing. And this newer 2018 paper was basically saying, given that we discovered whole new branches of bacteria in the last few years, like those Archaeata, or whatever the hell they are.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they're just one of a number of groups in that same little group.
Yeah. And so basically they were saying, maybe we need to do more searching, that we need to sample more organisms to see whether or not we even have the whole playing field available to be able to decide what was going on. And then the other potential interest is that the representatives of whatever it is that was the mitochondrian's ancestor might not actually be around today, or have so modified over time that it would be very difficult to do that. And Harold quite rightly points out, you're billions of years away from the thing. That's a long reach to try to retro-engineer and to look at it from that point of view. But an interesting point that was raised in the very section that Rana authority quoted happened about the little puzzling detail of why do mitochondria still have their own DNA. That's an interesting little question of how come they held on to their own DNA in this process. And Harold favors Allen's point of view, John Allen's paper, and I put the linkage up to the paper that he did on this, that it has to do with how the mitochondrion holds on to some regulatory systems that are essential, and you can't get rid of it. It's got its little mitts in there. And so this CORR hypothesis, Harold favors it, and it's discussed in Allen's particular paper, and you can follow up on your own on the research on that. Well, okay, Rana doesn't like endosymbiosis, goody gumdrops. And he says at the end of his piece that the points about in the light of this uncertainty, can the origin of mitochondria and hence eukaryotic cells be better explained by a creation model? I think so, but for many scientists, this is a road less traveled, and the one not traveling it is Rana. Where is his model? Okay, if you want to have a creation model for mitochondria, go right ahead and present one. But all it is a negative argument, and he's got to explain why mitochondria keep their own DNA.
Well, in that very paper that Rana, or the blog post that Rana made, it seems like he accepts endosymbiosis. Because he kind of he's like, yeah, it's, the bacteria entered an archaean, and that's endosymbiosis. And it's like, okay, he accepts that part, but then he's just kind of weird about these a few side aspects of it. It's like
they're minutia. He's hovering in on minutia, and it's like that God of the Gaps approach.
It is literally that. Yeah.
Because you say, oh, you don't know this, and you don't know this little thing. Well, clearly then we should have the creation model. What creation model? So, okay, go right ahead and explain. The problem is we can see endosymbiotic processes happening in living organisms, that there is a small set of circumstances of which you find organelles in the making
that are still kind of separate, and they're just now connecting up in symbiotic ways. And it's very, very rare to occur. These things are not happening, every 5 minutes. So the odds of us encountering that are really quite interesting. The other fun part is that you can be endosymbiotic with an endosymbiont. So you get these nested things of where an endosymbiotic system gets swallowed by another thing. So it's now a component of, I think that's happened in some of the algae. They just get berserk.
The rotoplex hypothesis, because it seems like, because you have the mitochondria event, and then later you have the chloroplast event, which it gives rise to the plant lineage. And so the red algae then gets swallowed by a yellow algae, which then gets swallowed by a different type of yellow algae.
So, and that's why anybody trying to dive into this area and relying only on stuff from, say, 1995 or 2000 is going to be way behind the curve. You'll remember, I think, from the Valentine book on phyla, there are some discussions of some of these endosymbiotic events in that. It's starting to kick in by 2004. Well, it ain't 2004 anymore. So I put up some reviews on endosymbiosis that puts out what we know and what we don't. And of course, tons of stuff we don't know. We don't know how lightning is formed in a thundercloud. Does that mean the Zeus hypothesis is open on the table again? I have my doubts about that. Let's see who's on. Oh, Nigel Harris. Glad I'm catching you live for the first time. It's very early in London. Oh, yes, it is indeed. It's the wee hours of the morning there. Hi, thank you. And thanks for joining on to the show. I'm always thunderstruck in any kinds of these video environments that you're getting people that can be in completely different parts of the planet simultaneously. So you could have people from the southern hemisphere where it's currently summer or coming up on summer. You can have people in Europe where they have to prop their eyes open because it's really early in the morning or late, depending upon the time frame involved, or likewise for here. And it's kind of a global environment that I had no direct interaction with when I was growing up. So kids, which I have to classify Jackson still as a kid, are living in a world of instantaneous global interactions that was just like a weird science fiction-y thing to me. So I'm still kind of getting used to it.
But well, yes. I'm a millennial.
Hello,
so
Nigel.
Right. I'm a millennial, so it's all right, RJ. So.
Yeah, and it's only going to increase more as we have more and more interactions and our smartphones get more invasive and smarter. And so we can gain access to information more and more readily. I think the one area, and people like John Perry, he had talked about that when he was a guest on your show, and I made a big comment in saying thumbs up, is the ability to visualize data, the ability to pull those things together and to make plain by illustration and image, and particularly moving interactions and that, to be able to explain complicated phenomenon. That's going to be more and more useful, not merely for modeling, but for explanation. If you can kind of do a mental map of what a fitness landscape means and how the landscape can be undulating, and that those landscapes are represented by organisms in ecological systems that have genes going inside of them, and that those are in symbiotic relationships at times, and that there's regulatory systems, and that there's selection pressures. Try imagining all of that at the same time. It's mind-boggling, and yet that's exactly what biological systems do. And you can every useful visualization, just like the cladograms that help clarify character states, and you can start seeing how certain things are grouped together with others by their shared characteristics, and that illuminates data fields, and you can look at the particular components of it. In every possible area of analysis in paleontology, you bump into that kind of stuff. And then you get ones where they're looking at individual components like the jaw transition, or the way that the endosymbionts are being connected up with, or the regulatory cascades and that. There's just zillions of things. So although text-only material is very useful, the ones where my little kid brain goes happy are the ones that have got really good illustrations. And you find that in an awful lot of the higher level explanatory and condensing material, where they've got really wonderful graphics departments these days. And one good image can clarify in your head the relationships of things, where they can highlight components where things are variable and changing, and it's absolutely delicious in this area. It's ironically tough to do in areas that involve giant scales, like astronomical phenomenon. It's actually a little bit tougher to do that. You can get kind of a cartoon of a swirling solar system, and that's kind of about it. That the number of components are grandiose in that area, and a lot of geological phenomena are tough to get at because they're involving erosion, and so you're looking at a slice of something that represents something that you can't see because it's gone now or buried underneath another mountain. Well, those are tricky in a way that in many ways the biological field is easier to deal with, because you can visualize a lot of the elements of it through microscopes and through direct imaging and electron scans that you can't with something that is involving time. And so things where like what is Andromeda Galaxy doing now? You can't tell, because the light that's telling you what it's doing now won't get here for another 2.5 million years. So we're stuck. So all of these fields, you have to have a sense about the dynamic of it. Sarah sent some guy, they're going on about Jordan Peterson. Yes, is said to be an excellent scientist by many other scientists who probably aren't named. Yeah.
Well, yeah, Peterson's kind of a nut. I mean, he's probably a decent psychologist, but he shoots his mouth off about politics and biology and other things, and it's just wackaloon. So.
Well, in the same way, Deepak Chopra, who isn't a scientist, but falls into that same kind of a thing, that I'm old enough to remember that there have been their counterparts before. If they weren't as instantly visible necessarily, because we didn't have the internet. Go farther back, you didn't have television, but those same dynamics of the talkative pundit with a following, then they would have to do them with books and pamphlets and individual speaking and all of that. So it slowed down the interconnections. With the internet, you can be stupid at the speed of light. So you can gain a following globally instantaneously. And as somebody who, if I'm lucky, if I've got 150 views compared to some of these things that I'll look at some creationist video and they've got, oh my God, 50,000 people have seen this, that it reminds you of the scale of things.
You hope that 49,999 of them are evolutionists, though. So.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think that's often the case with like Kent Hovind. I suspect Kent Hovind probably has more non-Kent Hovindistas watching him just to see what stupid he says.
He has hate watchers, yeah.
Yeah. The one nice advantage about the Kent Hovinds of the world is you don't have to monitor all of what they say, because they're so bloody repetitive that you can just sample occasionally. If a thing pops up as an area of inquiry, you can go, oh well, they're at that again. But the odds of actually encountering any new material is relatively remote. I've tried to do triage in that way. I know it's physically impossible to watch all the YouTubes, to listen to all the podcasts, to read all the blogs, and follow all the technical science work, and read all the... No, that ain't going to happen. It's physically impossible. So what you can do is find ways of triaging to keep ahead of it, to get kind of litmus test things. Like, oh, this person is unbelievably stupid. If I follow that person's feed, I get a window peeking into the stupid central of that particular viewpoint. And some of those have like network clusters that you can find. You can find it in the people orbiting the Answers in Genesis bunch. You find them in political contexts. You find them in various media outlets. And I've started to do this on Twitter, where I'm actually following a bit more of politicians because we're in a momentous time. And so I've actually started to follow a bit more to monitor what they need to do. And then you triage the reaction to it. We got Sarah Sumi has published a lot of real science papers. Who are we talking about here? Jordan Peterson?
Oh, we were.
I don't think. Yeah, I don't think
he's published anything.
He may have published in certain, there's journals and there's journals. That's another factor, is that you can assume
that even though something is technically an Elsevier publication, doesn't necessarily
Well,
mean it's.
from what I understand, I think he was more about the about dealing with patients than like actually doing research. As far as I understand, I could be wrong on that, but I do think that he was more of like a therapist.
Yeah, yeah, and the I haven't followed. I know he pops up in Hemet Meta comments and things periodically. You know,
Yeah.
people take
Well, because
analysis of it.
he does kind of say some wacky stuff about religion too. So
Yes, religion seems to be a thing that there's no shortage of wackiness
well,
about.
he's in some ways. I've seen people do comparisons between Peterson and Chopra, believe it or not, because he's kind of the there is a God, but it's the energy of the universe kind of
Yeah,
stuff. And so he's like calls himself a Christian, but doesn't hold to any of the Christian ideals.
yeah,
And
and
so it's like,
again, this has not been a new phenomenon. This has been the case in all religions as far back as we can tell. That they tend to pop up, though. In the old days, if somebody was in a society in which a particular dogma is the official version and they can kill you for it, then they ended up as, oh, Jordan Peterson burned at stake on July 7, 1722. But now that doesn't happen because you don't have that authority to do. Protestant cultures in particular fission off little subgroups because there's no centralized authority, although you do have some doctrinal things, the Methodist Church and Lutherans and all the rest, various synods, but everybody can just start up their own little version. So it's like a hydra that you can generate stuff reasonably. But even in the Catholic context, a global religion that spreads across as broad an area as it does has subspecialized fields as to the animist traditions that are in various local groups that then get kind of folded into the way the religion is practiced in that local regime. So yeah, the idea that people, the smorgasborder is a common phenomenon that we know in creationism, especially if you're at the lower echelon level. But this can also be true of people at the Peterson level, to where they've got some things they like here and another little thing they like there and another thing they're not so happy about. So they're just not going to play that one up. And they pin it together to make a cute little thing. And then they get to be up on the stage with their microphone. And then there's the adrenaline rush of the crowd hanging on their very words every time. And then, by the way, they've got the books available on the thing out on the thing. Yeah. And those all act as dynamic social mechanisms. That it's added to the mix of what was going on with an Amy. If I say Amy Semple McPherson, you go, who the hell was that? Wow. She was a preacher that was kind of on the fringe of kind of the revivalist spiritualist movement in the 1920s. And was just ripe for scandals and the like. And there were, in fact, a bunch of scandals about sexual peccadillos and her background and all of that. So she was a bit of a flim-flammer. And but that was all in the ancient days. She did some occasional radio broadcasts, I think. Another one that you probably have never heard of is Father Coughlin. He was a Roman Catholic nasty back in the 1920s and 30s, and he had a radio broadcast, and he basically was spewing anti-Semitic hate speech all during that period. And so the idea that some of the nutballs that you see at Breitbart and company in the 21st century, no, that's nothing new. What's new is that you get to do it in high definition and stereophonic sound, and it's available instantaneously everywhere on the planet. That's a new dynamic. And we have, as a culture, to kind of have to figure out. Brian Stevens put a linkage up. His own page on his papers doesn't inspire confidence in a researcher. That's another fun thing to do, is to look at somebody's homepage. I mean, you'll get a window into my mentality by looking at what I posted at my website. You know, I got my writings up. I have my reference bibliographies and all that, and people can ask questions in principle and all that. Whereas if somebody has a lot of postings that lack footnotes, there are creationists that we've encountered where if you look at their web page, they're just little short squibs where they're saying dogmatic things. And the irony is that if you look at, say, Berkeley's postings at the university on evolution issues, they're short paragraph long squibs without any references.
Well, how is that any more informative than what you're finding at the creationist website? They're saying a summary that's correct, but without the ability to follow up on it. All it is a squib on a web page. And so I'm very praiseworthy of people who do videos, for example, who put the damn sources up. If you're going to allude to stuff, you do it, I do it, and everybody that does that, even I praise them for it. And I hope everybody does the same. That if you find a video that says nice stuff, but they're alluding to some references, it's okay if a thing flashes up on the screen. That's if boop, this will happen with Pelagia and Vice Rhino and various others have done things where papers are shown on the screen. They may not put linkages in, bad dog, but they're on the screen so you can see. Well, you got freeze frame. I have spent many a while away hour where I go, oh, there was a source. Okay, back the video up, pause. Okay, write that title down. And also it means that you are manually checking out the information field. So when you do a check on that, if you find that, well, there was a paper there, so you should be able to find that text somewhere because it's a physical, it's a science magazine, blah, blah. You should be able to locate the bloody thing. And that also means it's reinforcing your information search skills, because you could argue that if you can't find a paper that was visually shown on screen in a video, your Google skills are way inadequate for this task. And you should probably just put the coat on, go away, and retire from the field. So you can use every one of these analytical things as a way of honing your own skills. I love going through those sorts of things where sometimes it's more of a detective show. If I'm watching, say, a Nova show, they may be alluding to scientists. They won't be putting up little papers on the screen, but they'll be talking about this particular scientist that's done this particular work. Okay, you write the name down, the topic that they're discussing, a particular geological deposit, a particular gene, do some Google searching. You can find the technical work where they are represented in the field. If you can't find the technical work that's represented in the field, that should raise alarm bells. Maybe it's unpublished material. Maybe it's a thing that's not quite, maybe it wasn't Nova class after all. So all of these things are ways that you can use source methods to find out the information you need to know. Then other things, you're going to find stuff where you are running up against a brick wall, you can't find the information. Well, that's often the case because no one's done it. They haven't researched the area yet. It could be a totally new area.
I was actually,
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was reading about placozoans yesterday, for reasons, and one of the things that I noticed is that a lot of the papers on placozoans kind of hover around the exact same material, and and really they're just kind of hinting at stuff that they're going to start doing research on in the future because of how little they know about these organisms.
Yeah. Some cases, organisms that live in really weird environments that you can't just put them in the vat in your lab because the pressures are wrong, the environment's wrong. They just go, and you have a dead critter on your hand. And you can't figure anything out that way. My favorite example that I alluded to in Evolution Slam Dunk are the damn metapleural glands of ants. The diagnostic feature that identifies something as technically an ant and not a wasp is the metapleural gland, which is a little teeny squirty thing on the back end of its little butt. And you think of the size of most ants, how tiny that is. And I discovered that one, they've only characterized the metapleural gland rudimentarily for 6 of the 20,000 species of ants, and nobody knows what they do. They guess it secretes something that does something in relation to something, but literally nobody knows what the diagnostic component of the ant actually does for the ant. What do you do? For one thing, it's hard to imagine, you're going to pull the little thing out? Are you going to stroke ants until they squirt? What exactly do you do? It's not, if you think about the difficulty of how would you investigate this, it doesn't surprise me that metapleural glands are still relatively
little understood in ant biology. And you think, you're going to write your grant out. Can you see that one? I want to investigate the squirty stuff from ants' butts.
Well, that makes me think of the people who do echinoderm research. We're going to bathe them in warm water, and they're going to give off sperm and eggs. That's what we're going to do.
Oh, T.D. Lane, who's been following my interactions, there is a creationist named Hacking. He's come under various screen names over the years, but his core name is always the same. And it says TD is waiting for Hacking to post those Colorado State University papers to disprove the old Earth. I suspect he never will. Oh, that's a safe bet. That Hacking is just, you'll encounter a lot of people like this online. They don't know diddly squat. They may or may not have ever read a damn thing. They may have seen a video or two, and they assume the things that say they want to be true are true, and they don't fact check anything, and they don't really listen terribly closely. So he picks up little buzzwords, the great unconformity. He loves playing that one. He seems to have a detestation for Nicholas Steno, the one of the founders of modern geology and his law of superimposition. He's basically a vague creationist and also a Trumpista. I mean, I go, duh, you got a bad method in one, why not have a bad method on the other? And that's no coincidence. That's why I would love to see a time when more news media ask really relevant methods questions before you get to the upper level of things, and use methods questions in dealing with how politicians deal with issues. Because yes, we know that's your policy. On what is it based? Where are you getting information from? Are you fact checking this information? Do you allow your mind to change its mind based on new information? And those are methods questions. And then as diagnostics, you could ask some basics. This is going to sound off the wall, but it's an important diagnostic question. How old do you think the Earth is? You can weed a lot of Tortukans out of the way right off the bat. If they say, well, it's 6,000 years old, you go, bye. And you should not be running for political office because you have an ability to mismanage data on such a colossal scale. Can we trust you to make policy decisions? I don't think so. And the same thing would go if you think the Earth is flat. There aren't really any flat earthers involved in political movements yet.
That we hope.
Well, but I do know, I've tracked a few. There happened to be a connection with a guy, Matt Meadows, who was, there was just a posting on, I can't remember who had done the expose on it, but whether it was Pelogi or somebody else had alluded to it. But anyway, he's serving in Congress, and he is connected to this land deal where they were digging up dinosaurs out
Paul.
And he sold it to Ken Ham. And so there's this connection with this creationist homeschool subculture to Ken Ham. And this guy is serving in Congress as a Republican. We can guarantee that he didn't vote for looking into Donald Trump's Ukrainian mess. And so to make an informed, thinks the Earth is 6,000 years old and thinks Ken Ham does. I don't think so. Agnostics that you can see a problem. I think we is our connection getting a little dicey. We're almost to the end of the hour anyway. Yep. So if it turns turtle,
it was going okay for the most part, but it kind of dropped for a second there, but it's back. So
TD Lane says, "Oh God, that you're going to make me angry, RJ." Yes, you can be angry like Marvin the Martian. Oh, that makes me so angry. Eludium Q32 space modulator. Side issue on all of that. But anyway, they have, if you can help out at the Patreon or at the GoFundMe, if you need like a Christmas gift for somebody, say you have somebody who can't stand evolution, well, get them my book. Kill two birds with one stone. And then after they frown at it, you just keep the book. So you get a multiple mileage out of it that way. And that will get you up to speed on the reptile mammal edition. If you like some fiction to escape from 2019, and who wouldn't, get a Paralogs
Rocks were there taking high priority to get that first volume out, and then hope get a second novel out in 2020. Get that out of the way. So no one can accuse me of not being busy.
That's true.
I try to keep up on that. But anyway, thanks all for the show this week. I do. Centers in the USA, and half of those are 14 years old. It is a legitimate question as to how many of the people saying they're flat earthers and making kind of a living at it because they're monetized and all that are just, and they don't really believe. But what I do about the ability of the human mind to claptrap if it has a bad method, given the population of the planet, I would expect there to be a certain number of flat earthers. Oh, Jackson Wheat's network bandwidth is low. It's all your fault, Jackson.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm in the South. What do you expect?
Yeah. It's the humidity. The humidity goes at the little electrons, honestly, and it makes life miserable for them.
Honestly, I'm surprised that we've had, you know, sustained internet connection for as long as we've had. You should all be lucky and thanking me. No, so,
yes, yeah. Yes, indeed. And I am amazed that any of this works at all. So the fact that we're able to communicate this way across all the planet, and you can watch this video whenever you like just by clicking on a bloody little device or see it even on your smartphone, I think that's amazing. So what we want is to have amazing and true, not amazing and head up your ass stupid. So I am strongly on the head up the amazing but true side, and so is Jackson.
It's also OBS. OBS is very large, and it's slow, and it's a lot on a. I'm doing this from a laptop, so
yeah, that's true. Well, when we all go the Wi-Fi 5, whatever the hell the new thing is, and we're all taken over by the Chinese bot spies, then everything will be just wonderful. But watch out for the cameras surveilling you from the lamppost. So. Next week will be the last one of November because Thanksgiving week I will not be here, and then I think I'm be back like the week beyond that, and then there will also be like a 2-week hiatus probably off in December with the Christmas New Year's holidays and that. So for those of you who felt that there was much too much RJ to go around, there will be some empty holes during the holiday seasons. AJS says the spreading of information may just keep civilization together. Not only may it is essential to it. That, as Thomas Jefferson said, that the well-being of the republic depends on a well-educated electorate. And the last 5 years or so suggest that the well-educated part is in peril, and we jolly well better get our act together on this part. Otherwise, we're screwed. So, till next week.
All right. Stopping the stream.